Greetings, my friends. Mike Wan here, and it is, according to the Gregorian calendar, October the 10th, 2025, or as stated in the tropical calendar, it is the 17th of Libra. They're one and the same. They're two different ways of describing the same moment in the sun's 365-day cycle. And we got a good video today. And I'm going to pick up where I left off from the last video. And the last video was about Charlie Church and showing the connections between Charlie Church and the shooting in Minneapolis, and then also the George Floyd events in Minneapolis as well. And so just to give you a little bit of context, when I uploaded that video, and it's a lot, like making these videos is, at least experiential for me, is it's greater than the sum of its parts. It's greater than just like putting slides together and, you know, sit in front of a laptop and hitting record. More goes into it, energetically, emotionally, however you want to go and describe it. And so usually what happens is I go through a process, usually takes about a week or two from the period of inspiration to make a video to like gathering all of the information, put it in slide form, and then to kind of go through what that narrative, the story, or how I'm going to present the information going through my head, and then finally recording and uploading. And when I'm done, like, I kind of feel it's a combination of not quite exhaustion, but definitely like, whew, you know, this is off my plate. But there's also a big sense of relief. You know, it feels good, like you work hard on something and then you complete a project. And so that happens with all the videos. That's just, you know, my process. Once I uploaded that last video, maybe about a half an hour later, I saw for the first time I saw that there was a correspondence between the Charlie Church event and Snake Eyes, the movie. And by now, like, I mean, that's kind of old news. You know, that's how the cycle works. They just keep on giving you new things every day or two to put your attention on. But the Charlie Church thing and the Snake Eyes thing, you know, it's old news, but that's where I'm going to pick up. And what I'm going to talk about today, I think, is going to be different than maybe what you've heard before, but it goes more or supports more the idea or the concept that I've been attempting to demonstrate and share with these last couple of videos, which is, one, how all of these seemingly separate occultic rituals are connected, and how their connectivity feeds off of one another or continues the feeding in the same way, and then ultimately how all of these rituals in the shadow realm are really pointing not to what the actual ritual is about, but they all feed into something else, which is ultimately creating this inverted or false Age of Aquarius, which is really about, you know, turning everyone into computers, or, you know, who knows what it's going to be, but that's the direction it looks like. The whole transhumanism thing, and, you know, the movie The Matrix, and how did everyone get into the Matrix pods? Like, that's what this is about. That's the thing that hasn't changed over the last 100 years. Like, you know, events come and go, and the thing that doesn't change is the constant march towards the human being and technological connection or exchange or alchemical marriage, whatever you want to talk about. So that's what we're going to do. So let's jump right in. But we're not going to just talk about that. That's just going to get us started. What we're really going to talk about is, these videos, at least from my perspective, are so much more than information. It is you as the observer, as the witness, me as the storyteller, the maestro. Is I'm bringing you through a process, and what this process is really an exercise in consciousness, ultimately to both free up bound consciousness, but then also a demonstration on how it works. So what we're going to cover today, as I said, is like snake eyes, and we're going to look at it a little bit differently. And then we'll go back into like Pluto and this Age of Aquarius stuff. But then, and this is where the real value is, or where the real process is I'm going to do an example of how it all works. So if you're watching this and you're here now at this point in the video, and for whatever reason you don't want to continue to go through the Charlie Church stuff, or your hot button isn't necessarily getting into the details of the astrology and the Pluto, I do encourage you to skip towards the end. I have no idea what the time mark is going to be at this moment as I'm recording it, but figure it out. And I really want you to go and go through this exercise, which I'm going to conclude with. So let's move forward. So we all know by now the whole snake eyes correspondence with the Charlie Church event. And immediately after hearing about it, I watched the movie. It's enjoyable for me to watch movies, not necessarily because I like to get lost in the story and be entertained, but I do find joy. I have a good time looking at both the techniques of storytelling as done by Hollywood directors, and then also the reading of the sub rosa, of the deeper messages in there. And so I watched this, and my initial thought is that it's too obvious. This movie is different than most of the shadow realm, shadow language type of movie telling. Most of the time, there is more plausible deniability. It's not so in your face, which in my opinion there's more artistry in there, but it kind of separates the viewers into two groups. There's enough plausible deniability that if an individual who's watching something which has shadow language embedded in it, they can deny it. As I talked about in the last video, I talked about dates, and I talked about like interpretations of names. And if someone watches that and they do not think that that's how the world works, they'll be like, it's easy for them to dismiss it. Likewise, for the individual who is able to lean in a little bit deeper as to how communications work in this realm, well, you can go and see these almost invisible lines of connectivity. But snake eyes, it was just over the top. There was no artistry. There was no seduction. It was just like, there's a guy, a politician, his name is Charlie Kirkland. He got shot in the neck. The little bit of plausible deniability, I looked at Snopes. Snopes is a great place to see how they want to frame up the plausible deniability crowd. And they can't even do that good of a job. Right here, they say some users pointed out the character's last name was the same as the first name of the suspect in Kirk's killing Tyler Robinson without, they just overlook the fact that this character is also called the Executioner. I mean, it's if you're familiar with what all of this stuff with Snake Eyes, you know what I'm talking about. But that's not where I'm going to go. In fact, if anything, this is different. How it's different or why it's different, Snake Eyes is different than the other stuff because it is so obvious. And I'm going to kind of push that to the side right now, and I'm going to focus in on maybe the more subtler parts of this film. So the first thing I want to bring up is the filmmaker. The filmmaker is Brian De Palma, who is, a well-known, well-respected Hollywood filmmaker, particularly through the 70s and 80s. He was a leading member of the new Hollywood generation. September 11th, this date, shows itself time and again in this storyline. And the reason why I'm leaning into Brian De Palma is just to put into context his name. It is inherently pointing to Phoenicia or the Phoenicians. And I'm not going to get too deep. I'm not going to get deep at all into what the Phoenicians are, but at least in the histories in which we're told and how, we got here, the Phoenicians are one of the biggest mysteries, mysterious cultures in our modern world. Really, really interesting and fascinating. But the Phoenicians means the palm tree people, the land of the palms. Phoenician also plays with Phoenix. There's all sorts of different ways we could go into it, but I'm just pointing out the obviousness between De Palma and De Palma meaning of the palms, and Phoenicia, and Phoenicians being the people of the palms, and Phoenicia being the land of the palms. But because we've talked so much about the subtle connection to Freemasonic concepts and terminology in the shadow language of this entire Charlie Church event, we have to recognize that, or I'm going to point out that De Palma, who connects to the Phoenicians, is also like a roundabout way to Freemasonry as well, as the primary city, or one of the legend, the primary city of the Phoenician Empire was called Tyre. It's now in modern day Lebanon. It's one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities in the world. It's the legendary birthplace of Europa. All sorts of things come from Phoenicia. And Tyre is central to Freemasonry because of, the characters King Hiram of Tyre, King Solomon, and Hiram Abiff. We talked a little bit about Masonic rituals, and, the first one is the first ritual of becoming a Freemason is more or less acting out the Hiram Abiff legend, and this all connects back to Tyre, the king of Tyre, or there's an interconnection with it. So the Phoenician Empire is connected to Freemasonry, even if it's just in this legendary ways, because, there is no agreed upon, historical origin of where Freemasonry comes from. There's lots and lots of stories, but we can see that there is a connection, and we see that is embedded in a roundabout way with Brian De Palma. And you could apply that same sort of logic, I suppose, to all of Brian De Palma's films. You could apply it to all Hollywood films too, that they're all kind of Freemasonic, but that's not what we're talking about right now. Here's an image of ancient Tyre, and this is what it looks like now. It was this island city. All right, let's continue to move on because we got a lot to cover. So now the other thing which I want to point out about Snake Eyes is its correspondence to Donald Trump. The majority of Snake Eyes was filmed on studio sets and in the Montreal Forum in Montreal, Canada. But the production also spent 2 weeks on location in Atlantic City filming in Trump's Taj Mahal Hotel and Casino. So though it is the Taj Mahal, or the building which is the casino, which was once called the Taj Mahal, is no longer owned by Trump, and it's no longer called the Taj Mahal. It's called the Hard Rock Casino, Atlantic City. At the time of the filming, it was a Donald Trump property. So this is like not even, I mean, this is different than typical shadow language, if you will. This is just like an actual connection that we can follow along in the the story of the the making of the movie Snake Eyes. So we see Donald Trump here, and obviously if you're familiar with the Charlie Church story, like that's a big part of it, as well as the connection between him and Donald Trump. And this is just going to get deeper and deeper and deeper. So what do we have here? This is just the timeline of when the casino, the Trump Taj Mahal, how it was, the filming of Snake Eyes was happened in 1997, and in this time period, Trump owned it. That's easily verified, or information which you can find online. We're not even going to lean into, what is the Taj Mahal? What is that symbolic of? Hard rock, anytime you see rock or rock symbology in the modern culture, you can feel comfortable knowing that that is metaphoric of rock and stone metaphor, which is Freemasonic. Let's talk about this in the case of Snake Eyes. So Snake Eyes is a gambling term. It's a craps term. It's, when you roll the dice and you get two ones. In the case of Snake Eyes, it's a specific event in the game of craps that benefits one better while costing another. That's kind of an interesting understanding of what the words or the term Snake Eyes refers to. In the movie, they have this line, Snake Eyes. When they actually say it, the house wins. So there's another implication of Snake Eyes. Basically, when Snake Eyes, the concept of Snake Eyes is the casino, the house wins, and or there is a playing of, two people are pitted up against one another. It's a divide and conquer technique, if you will. Also, as we were talking about the timeline with Trump, September 10th is when Trump Resorts filed for bankruptcy. Trump Entertainment Resorts was the entity which owned the Taj Mahal. And so we just see that date shows up again. So on a slight pivot, but we're gonna tie it all together. One of the pieces in the Charlie Church narrative is the fact that his father was an architect that was involved in the Trump Tower located in Manhattan. And so if you go and you look, this is the Trump Tower right here, and you go and you look in like the Wikipedia page, it lists the architect is actually Der Schutt. It wasn't Charlie Kirk's father, Robert Kirk. So what happened is, or what seemingly the story which is being presented is that Kirk's father was like on the team. Usually when a big project like this, like a large building is designed and built, there is a team of architects and there's one primary architect. And we're going to lean into this primary architect in a moment, this Der Schutt. He was the primary architect. He probably oversaw the overall vision and maybe was involved in the larger or more significant pieces of design work. And Scott, or the primary architect, was also involved or was responsible for client interactions. Like, he's the guy who's working with Trump. And then they've got junior architects who do like a lot of the grunt work. Like Scott is not going to design the stairwells, but they need to be designed. And that's where Charlie Kirk's father, I don't know if he did the stairwells, but he was seemingly involved in a lesser significant role. So I'm not going to get deeply into this, but if you're interested, if you like this type of stuff, this is what you can find this online. This was a blog entry from this guy, John Grayson, which was posted February 16th, 2017, titled, "I have cracked the code of New York's latest Masonic building, Trump Tower." And this guy goes like really detailed into all the reasons why and all the symbols, Masonic symbols, that are inherent within the design of Trump Tower. Let's see right here, this from the beginning. Donald Trump built a tower in the style of the Masonic altar, which he believes is a great piece of art, and has personally overseen the decoration, which includes much Masonic imagery in his penthouse. It's what the article goes by. You could just search online, you could find it. There's a little bit of a mention of Scott in that article. It says this building was designed from the bottom up by architect Scott, and was developed by Donald Trump. Scott's affiliation with Freemasonry is unknown. That's what's said in this article. So let's get a little bit into Scott, because he's kind of a famous architect, but we'll start right here. He was famous for designing Trump Tower in New York City, but he also created an initial design for the Trump Taj Mahal in Atlantic City. So Trump Tower was, I believe, completed before the Taj Mahal was built. There you could see a continuity. The relationship between Scott and Trump had already been in place. It's seemingly at least at that time, a long-standing relationship. Scott is, there aren't that many famous architects. Perhaps Frank Lloyd Wright, maybe another architect or two, but for the most part, architects are not like well known in the mainstream world. But if there were a list of famous rock star architects, Scott would be one of them. He is particularly well known for his for a lot of the works he did in New York City. Interestingly, his name was not Scott. His birth name was Donald Scott. And at some point, as a young man, he legally changed his name to Scott, which is interesting. He's born in Reading, Pennsylvania. We'll get to that in a moment. So Donald Scott was born and raised in Reading. He attended Penn State, and then he got his master's degree in architecture at Yale. And when he was at Yale, he somehow developed a relationship with Paul Rudolph, who was the dean of the Yale School of Architecture. And then this Paul Rudolph became his mentor. Like, that's not like common. Like, if you go to any sort of master's degree program, whether it's architecture or anything else, the idea that the dean could become your mentor would probably be desirable for anyone who's a student there. But Scott showed some sort of something where the dean of the Yale School of Architecture invested in him. He invested his time in him. That's what the mentorship program was. And probably through this Paul Rudolph guy, who is immensely connected. We can assume that as a dean at Yale, opened up a lot of doors for Durst Scott. And just, I found this about him just to kind of put into context the type of influence that Durst Scott had in the world. Was he was responsible for designing what did they call it? The luxurious and modern condominiums that are located on the top of, or located at 100 United Nations Plaza. Like he built the condominiums, which I'm going to assume a lot of like world diplomats, all of the UN folk, like this is where they live. We're not going down to UN, but I'm assuming you know like what the UN is and the Rockefellers and all that other stuff. And they had this guy, Durst Scott, was the architect of where they lived. And he put a striking glass and masonry tower boasting a distinctive pyramidal top on top of it. So again, this is just kind of like painting in the background this role of, Freemasonic, both imagery, symbology, architecture, storytelling, all of that. So let me just walk through this connection. We got Charlie Church. We know that he has a connection to Donald Trump. Charlie Church is connected to Snake Eyes, which was filmed at Taj Mahal, which then puts a connection here with Donald Trump. And then Durst Scott, as a designer, as the architect, connects to that, and he connects to Donald Trump. And we see Robert Kirk is right here, and Charlie Kirk is right here. And, we could see how all of this connects. And where we see these connection points on a certain level of reality, we know this is where energy flows. And, this consciousness, a part of understanding consciousness is understanding how consciousness is directed and how it flows. And so this here is kind of like the schematic of it. And so why am I going so deeply into this is because if you remember in the last video, which I did, I talked a lot about the idea linking between the accredited shooter of Charlie Church, whose name was Tyler Robinson, and how Tyler has a Freemasonic implication, and then the trans shooter from 2 weeks before the Charlie Church shooting, the one in Minneapolis, whose name was Robin Westman. And then I showed how Westman connects to the idea of the role of the senior warden in Freemasonry, who is the guarder of the West Gate. That is the Westman. The Westman is the guarder of the West Gate, and how the Tyler and the senior warden or the Westman are connected within the Freemasonic structure. Well, symbolically within the Freemasonic structure is the role of the architect. And so when we see here this connection on the deeper levels of Snake Eyes, of the architect, of Charlie Kirk's father being an architect, and the architect's role of with Donald Trump, we again see the significance of, what at least appears to be, to me, is that in this example right here, this is talking mostly about what happens within the structure of the lodge and the rituals, but this is the symbol. The architect is the symbol of like God, or their version of the symbolic representation of the divine, referring to the great architect. This also plays very close to the idea of the goat, the greatest of all time, all this sort of stuff. You could, we're pulling on the threads, and when you pull on the threads, the whole thing just kind of like unwinds because it's all connected. And then also the role here of Charlie Church and his father, and then Donald Trump, and I think it says right here, it talks about this idea of, it's called Trumpification, a professional trait that's inherited from Trump to his father. So there's a lot of like father-son imagery, which is in this storyline within this shadow realm, but then it's also significant within the overall structure of the Freemasonic realm or world. So now let's go a little bit deeper. So Harrisburg, Palmyra, and Reading. First off is that, where are we? Right here. Snake Eyes. Here's Snake Eyes. Here's Snake Eyes. Snake Eyes takes place in Atlantic City. That's where it takes place. And Atlantic City is the setting for possibly the most famous board game of all time, which is called Monopoly. Since its origination, there are other versions of Monopoly that take place in different parts, are connected to different cities, but original Monopoly is about Atlantic City. And so all of the streets which you buy in Monopoly is or are Atlantic City streets, and just the entire idea of what Monopoly is about and what it points to, and it's easy to see the connections between monopolies and controlling factions in our modern world, and Trump and all that sort of stuff. Like, yeah, that's there too. But we're going a little bit deeper. So we've got Monopoly, is connected to Atlantic City, but then also within Monopoly, assuming you've played it, is the role of the railroads, right? There are 4 different railroad blocks, squares, and one of them, in fact, the very first one, is the Reading Railroad and it's literally the connection, the Reading Railroad, like Reading, Pennsylvania, where we have Scott is from. He's from Reading, Pennsylvania. We saw that. Where did we see the Scott? Reading, Pennsylvania. He was from Reading, PA. So now we've got this level right here of connection. So that's kind of interesting. So right here is Reading. That's Reading, Pennsylvania. I'm recording this right here. This is Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. There's the Susquehanna. And then right in the middle is this little town called Palmyra. And what is Palmyra? Palmyra is one of the ancient Phoenician cities. Palmyra is the ancient city in central Syria. It was not one of the predominant Phoenician cities such as Tyre, but it was, connects to Phoenicia. In fact, this area of Pennsylvania between Reading and Harrisburg is called Lebanon. So we're just looking at all the different pieces that are in the shadow realm. So, and then the Phoenicians, they themselves, like the Phoenician Empire, it was more or less it was a monopoly. They had a monopoly on trade routes. They had a monopoly on all sorts of different things. So the concept of monopoly connects to the Phoenician Empire through their domination of specific industries and trade routes. So we see in the background of, in the sub rosa, built into these shadow stories that are being presented in the subconscious realm for anyone who's paying attention, are all of these things. So here's this map. We've got Atlantic City. Atlantic City connects to Snake Eyes. That's De Palma. De Palma's the Phoenicians. Phoenicians connects to Palmyra, Pennsylvania, which is right by Reading, PA, which is where Der Scott is from. And Der Scott works with Donald Trump, who's all about monopoly, Atlantic City. And again, like we're seeing wheels within wheels. We're seeing circles within circles. And what all of this stuff is doing is it's encapsulating, it's capturing energy through the form of consciousness, energy through the form of emotions, like all of the different ways which an observer who is paying attention, even if they're not necessarily, particularly if they're not paying attention on this level, if they're just paying attention on the surface sort of stuff, they are feeding into the sub rosa, or the subconscious part of this story. It's there to capture it. The reason why we're talking about this right now is because we're collapsing it. By talking about it without any sort of emotional charge, it collapses. And that's, what we're doing is a tightrope walk, because there are people out there right now who got really into, decoding snake eyes, and it becomes this like conspiratorial entertainment, but it goes nowhere. It's just like a dog chasing its tail. It's just rubbernecking, if you will. So as I said before, where all this really leads to, like if we look at the timing and we look at how this all connects, it's this idea of Pluto going out of bounds. We're going to come to that in a moment. But before we get into that, I have to bring up Baron Trump. Not the son of Donald Trump, Baron Trump, but the books that supposedly were released in the late 1800s. The reason I'm bringing this up is because, as I said, when I started talking about Snake Eyes as a movie, that it lacked any sort of artistry. It was just like, here it is. Like, there's no imagination. There's no seduction to it. It's just like, I'm going to pull down my pants. There's no build up. And to me, that's a little bit, I don't know. I just think it lacks artistry. It lacks taste. It lacks, the quality of craftsmanship as it relates to storytelling. And I've seen that once before, and it was this idea of the Baron Trump stories. And I'm assuming you have some degree of understanding of them. Around 2017 is when it was released that there were all of these stories that came out in the late 1800s about this fictional character called Baron Trump, and there are lots and lots of similarities between Baron Trump and all this other stuff, almost in the same way with Snake Eyes and Charlie Kirk. I made a video about this. I made a video that was published July 9th, 2021 called I forgot what it wasn't sus as fuck, but I played along on that popular statement at the time. I forgot what it was, but anyway, you could see that I made this video. I think 2 Baron Trump books were published. I question whether or not the whole thing is just an astroturf, but regardless, let's take it that they were released in the 1800s. But one of them was called Baron Trump's Marvelous Underground Journey. And the story follows Baron Trump as he meets this mysterious Russian sage. Remember, the Russians are involved in this story as well. The Russians were involved right here. And this Russian sage called Don Fum guides Baron to go on a fantastical adventure to discover the hidden world inside Earth, a subterranean realm. And this is all very metaphorical and analogy, whatever the descriptive word of being an analogy is. Like, that's what this story is about. And we can see that there is a correspondence between this Don Fum character, the mysterious sage, as a Plutonic figure. For Pluto is the symbol of the god of the underworld. And so this is all about Baron Trump going underground, an underworld journey, and this ties back to Pluto going out of bounds. As I talked about in the last video, is how the idea of, whatever the quote-unquote planet Pluto is, it was connected, it was anchored to the idea of the underworld and all that the underworld connects to. And so if everything which we're seeing with this Charlie Kirk story is, connecting to all the other stories and like flowing through the Burning Man ritual, and ultimately it's going to this idea, this story that was presented, that on August 29th, the planet Pluto goes out of bounds for thousands of years. And, the Pluto parallel. So Pluto unbound. On August 29th, 2025, Pluto, the planet of death and rebirth, secrets and revelations, looking evil in the eye, hard truths we must face, sex, hidden money, power struggles. It goes out of bounds. So this is from someone who's doing an astrological interpretation of of what this means, of Pluto going out of bounds. So I'm not going to go too deep into this. I'm probably going to make another video where I go deep into this, but there's just so much astrological minutia. And if astrological minutia is not your thing, I don't want to go down that path for the wrong audience, but I will create that analysis for those who are interested. But anyway, so in basic astrology, like on the astrology which most people think of as astrology, it begins with something astronomical, something which is observable, and something which is, quote unquote, objectively real. And the astronomical is the subjective or the meaning base built upon something which is objectively real. But what we're seeing here with this Pluto out of bounds is a buildup of something which isn't exactly real. There is a logic to where the meaning of Pluto out of bounds is coming from, but it's built upon smoke. It's built upon smoke. It's not built upon something you can see. Like, you can actually see the full moon. We might not know what the moon is. We might, maybe the explanation of what causes the phases of the moon may not be exactly what's happening, but we can all agree that we do see that it's an objective shared experience, that we see the image of a full white disk once every 29 days in the sky. That's what I mean from the objective level. But this Pluto out of bounds thing, it is not. It is there's a logic based upon what it means, but it is not built upon anything objectively or observably real. From an astronomical perspective, the term out of bounds does not exist. It is only an astrological concept. And in astrology, coming from someone who is rather knowledgeable, I'm not the most knowledgeable astrology guy out there, but I'm pretty well versed. I can say this, that the majority of astrology concepts are built upon something knowable and objective. And then there are secondary and tertiary astrological concepts which are built upon ideas. And so that doesn't mean that they don't work. It just means that they can collapse once you really begin to understand that they were built upon, ridiculousness. And this Pluto out of bounds is one of them. But what the thing is with the Pluto out of bounds, the reason Excuse me. I'm pointing this out right now is this Pluto out of bounds idea, which happened on October or August 29th, is intimately or deeply connected to this moment in time that we're sharing right now is the beginning of the Age of Aquarius. And though it's not necessarily stated that directly, as when you look at the Pluto out of bounds and like the people who are talking about it, it's implied. And so again, I'm going to go into the details and back up all of this, what I'm saying right now, in another video for those of you who are interested and knowledgeable about astrology to this level. But right now, I'm just going to keep it high level. They're saying that this concept of Pluto going out of bounds is not going, once it goes out of bounds, they're saying it's going to go out of bounds right now for 10 years, and it's going to be out of bounds for 10 years, and for these 10 years, it's out of bounds, like, you know, all hell's going to break loose, and then it's going to come back in bounds, and then it's not going to go out of bounds again for several thousand years. That doesn't make any sense to me. Like I think I'm pretty skilled at looking at astrological concepts and being able to deduce them down, or to see the connection to the observable reality of what we'd call astronomy or just sky watching. It doesn't make any sense that I understand what they're saying about Pluto out of bounds, and that does make sense, and I do comprehend that and see where that fits into the astrophysics model which is being provided. But the astrophysics model does not support that Pluto is going to go out of bounds and then not out of bounds for a couple thousand more years. But more importantly, the reason why this is said is because it corresponds with this idea of astrological ages, because astrological ages last for, 2,000 to 2,160 years, depending upon whatever system you want to use to define what an astrological age is. So, again, like I talked about this in other videos, I think I did. This has always been the point of what all of this current round of occultic rituals is to really ground in the idea, first and foremost in the astrological world, and then also in the creative world of the Burning Man culture, because the Burning Man culture is the highest concentration of highly, highly creative people of anywhere, I would say, on Earth, is like now's this time of the Age of Aquarius, and the Age of Aquarius equals this. It equals like technology, it equals computer technology. And nowhere is that true. Like, it kind of is, because the Age of Aquarius is said to be a time of innovation, but innovation does not automatically equal computer technology. This is what's being sold and woven together. And as we're going to see in a moment, like, it doesn't matter if it's true or not, all for it to come into fruition. In fact, I would say it is coming into fruition. If you really look at the world right now, it does match this inverted, kind of perverted telling of the Age of Aquarius mythology. But that's what all of the spell casting and the spell binding is about. Let me see what I have right here. So yeah, I'm not going to get into, I'm 48 minutes into it. I'm not going to talk about like what out of bounds is. It's not even the Age of Aquarius. I mean, the Age of Aquarius is just as simple as, to know an age is as simple as looking at a sidereal zodiac and seeing what sign the sun is in on the spring equinox. As you can see, spring equinox 2025, the sun is in Pisces. We're still in the age of Pisces. We've got 5 degrees. The astrological ages go backwards, meaning the sun will eventually go to 4 degrees, 3 degrees, 2 degrees, 1 degree, 0 degrees. and then it enters the sign before Pisces, which is Aquarius. We could see this is 2025. This is the astro charts for spring equinox in 2050, and you can see now the sun has moved back a degree or two because it shifts. The sun moves one in. I'm pausing because I don't want to open this can of worms of how this all works. I'm going to save that for another video. If you know your astrology, if you understand how it works, well then you know what I'm talking about. For those who are curious, there will be another video where I explain the nuts and bolts and how all of this stuff works. And I think it's important to know it. So, where am I going with all this? So the Age of Aquarius is not happening right now. They're trying to like create a very, very plausible story that makes sense, that people can get behind, so that in consciousness they could say like, yeah, this is true. This is the Age of Aquarius. And then they begin to hold that reality in place. That's how reality creation is manipulated, how spellbinding and why spellbinding works. It's a dance between truth and fiction and skill. So, okay. So now you're back to my face. This is what I have, the example of what I'm talking about, of like creating reality. The reason why I am putting so much emphasis in deconstructing what's happening here. This is not conspiracy entertainment. This is not to get lost in it. It's to understand how the realm works. And so I'm going to give you an example of how you create something out of nothing. Okay. So I want you to just imagine for a moment. Imagine that I'm about to reveal to you one of the secrets of reality, of this realm. And so I'm assuming you're aware or familiar with the fact that water freezes at 32 degrees. And, you know, that's an objective, observable, knowable truth, right? So this is where we start to get into the secrets of reality and how it hides right in front of your face. So we can look at that or describe this from a different perspective. Yes, water freezes at 32 degrees. But water or ice melts at 33 degrees. Same thing. We're talking about the same thing. We're just looking at it from the other side of the coin. So let's think about this for a moment. At 33 degrees, something happens. Something happens at 33 degrees that doesn't happen at 32 degrees, that doesn't happen at 30 degrees, that doesn't happen at 34 degrees, that doesn't happen at 35 degrees. But at 33 degrees, something is happening. It's funny, I'm doing this right now. For those who know the hand signals, like that just came out naturally. Or did it? At 33 degrees, something happens. And so what happens? What happens at 33 degrees, which isn't happening at these other degrees, is there's something that occurs on the material level of ice. Something is awakened. And, you know, what's literally happening is the ice begins to melt. It begins to change form. And if we decide to describe this from an alchemical or an elemental perspective, what we could say is that dormant fire energy becomes awakened. I mean, that's what's happening. Like the ice is solid, and then suddenly it starts to melt. Something is happening within the molecules of the ice where it begins to change form. And we can describe it. And it's a fair description. It's not the only description, but it's a fair description to say that, quote unquote, fire or heat or whatever, what fire represents what was dormant when it was 32 degrees is now coming alive at 33. All right. So now that you know that is true, like, I mean, it's always been right in front of you, but I just kind of framed it up in such a way that, you know, it makes sense. You're like, okay, I see what you're saying. So now we're going to take it one step further. So you're going to go and you get a piece of ice, like a real cold piece of ice, like from your freezer, and you're going to sit down and you're going to hold it in the palm of your hand. And you're going to hold it in the palm of your hand with the palm. You're going to hold it in the palm of your hand, and you're going to know that it's going to begin to melt. And as it melts, that there's something happening inside that ice. You know, this awakening of dormant fire energy is happening, and you're witnessing it. And if you hold that in mind, in consciousness, as it's happening, what you're doing is you're creating a link. This is how reality works. Whatever you put your attention to, and then how you understand what you're putting your attention to, defines the relationship of what's occurring. This is happening all the friggin' time. So you're watching this, and you know that the dormant fire energy is awakening, and it's like melting on your hand. This is all really, really happening, and you are really, really connecting with it. So now we're going to go a step deeper. Inside your physical body, you've got a spinal, you've got like a backbone made of vertebrae. There are 33 vertebrae. Just like the 33 degrees is when the fire element is awakened in ice, you've got 33 vertebrae. So now you're holding the ice, and you're aware that you have 33 vertebrae, because you are capable of holding multiple concepts in your mind simultaneously. So you're witnessing the awakening of fire energy in your hand. It's literally happening. It's a literal occurrence, which is part of this realm. And you're aware that you have 33 bones in your back. And then you're even more aware of the fact that those bones are protecting something, which is called your spinal cord. What your spinal cord is it's the primary nerve conduits, your nervous system. And your nervous system works. It relays information through basically electricity, through light, through fire. If we want to talk about it elementally, we could call it fire. So now you know that you have in your hand the melting ice cube, which is embodying the awakening of fire energy, and you have an awareness of your backbone. You have 33, which is connected to the 33 degrees in which it's melting, and you know that there's the spinal cord, which is using light or electricity to relay signals throughout your physical body. And now you're going to bring it one level deeper. And you're like, okay, I know that there is a awakening in my hand of dormant fire energy. And I know that that is a truth. And I know that this physical world works with resonance. And so I'm going to bring my awareness as I'm watching that awakened fire energy in my hand happening. And I'm going to bring that awareness to my spinal cord, and I'm just going to give my body a command. And I'm going to say, dormant fire energy in my spinal cord, awaken, like the awakening of fire energy in the ice in my palm. Something like that. Anything which is connecting in consciousness between your body and the ice in your hand, and now you've deepened this connection. Now you're going to deepen it even more so. You're going to go and you're going to connect your breath with it. And you're going to start from the base of your spine, and you're going to bring your awareness as you're inhaling up your spine, and you're going to count to 33. And you're going to exhale, and you're going to go down your spine. You're counting to 33 as it's melting in your hand, and your 33 vertebrae in your back. And you're going to go even deeper, and you're going to do it 33 times. And then you're going to go even deeper. And you're going to do that 33 days. And I promise you this, if you do that, there will be changes. You will experience actual changes. You will be linking so deeply this idea of awakening dormant, I don't know, like dormant pieces within your body, which can be accessible through your nervous system, and they're coming awake because it is real to you. It is as real as can be, and it makes sense to you in your conscious mind. It will change, and part of your journey is to see what that change is. And maybe you can be open enough and say, like, I'm not going to limit to what I think that change is, but I'm going to be observant to see where it's going to show itself. It's the truth of our reality. That's how it works. Okay? So let's say that then I start teaching this. I start teaching this to people all over the place. I'm traveling all around. I'm like, I'm going to awaken. I'm going to teach you how to awaken dormant abilities within your body, within your mind, within your nervous system through, just through breath and consciousness and ice and water. And, starts to become successful. And I start traveling around and people start coming. And I continue to grow. And I'm like, you know what? I want to become international. And I go and I fly over to the UK. I go over to England and I'm going to teach my course. And I go and I lay out the whole thing and I tell the whole story that I just told you. And this person raises their hand, front row. They tell me, like, I beg to differ with you, Mike Wan. Ice doesn't melt at 33 degrees. At least here in the UK, it doesn't melt at 33 degrees. It melts at 1 degree because we don't follow the Fahrenheit system. We follow the system of Celsius. And in the system of Celsius, like, water is frozen at 0 degrees and it melts at 1 degree. So now how does all this make sense? How does that make sense? For any individual who actually went through, the experience of 33 degrees melting ice back in America, I mean, I promise you this, there will be changes. There will be changes if you went through what I just described to you. But as my friend out in the UK just exposed, that 33 degrees as the melting temperature of ice, like, yes, it's true within the system of, America or other places where they use the Fahrenheit system, but it's not universally true. What is universally true is ice does melt. And ice melts at a very certain temperature. And you could call that temperature, you could measure it in many, many different ways. How you measure it, that changes. But the fact that it does melt, that doesn't change. You've got 33 vertebrae, assuming you've got the same body type, that doesn't change at all. So this is what I mean by this playing of what is objectively real, what is subjectively real within a construct, and then how the playing of the two, this is why we discern, what is objectively real, what is real within actual experience. Like, as you begin to see the difference between the two, as that becomes clear, not only do the stories, like, this is what's happening with the Age of Aquarius, like, there's some degrees of truth to it, but it's also built upon, like, a whole bunch of things which aren't exactly objectively true. As you become more knowledgeable between what's objectively true, as your discernment gets to what's objectively true and what's subjectively true, is when you begin to play the game at a different level. So, all right. So let's go back to the situation. So the guy goes and he tells me, he's like, no, it doesn't happen at 33 degrees. It happens at 1 degree. But because I'm a quick thinker, and I'm like, well, of course, they're two different systems, but they work complementary. Because how many spinal cords do you have? How many backbones do you have? You have one backbone, but it's made of 33 vertebrae. And so then I could begin to tell the story like how we're doing this. We're just doing counts of 1 and 0, and we're connecting in a different way. And I could go and craft a story where it makes sense. Now, I promise you this, that there are individuals who are very knowledgeable about astrology right now, and they understand the differences between what's called the tropical zodiac and the sidereal zodiac. And in their mind, they most likely have a preference or a judgment for what they think is the better or the more true zodiac. Like, tropical zodiac is the right one. Sidereal is for this. And they're going to start to come up with rules. And be like, well, you use the sidereal zodiac and it is applicable in these circumstances. But then we use the tropical zodiac in these circumstances. And they've created a story where they have made these two things which are not subjectively real, the sidereal or the tropical zodiac, but they've made them work, whereas they would be contradictory. They've created a bridge, just in consciousness, just in belief. And so the same thing could be done with like ice melting at 33 degrees or ice melting at 1 degree. You can make a story where it makes sense, and then you can build upon it. So this is where this all gets really, really, at least for me, where it gets really exciting or where there's real value to it. When one comes, like if someone were to hear what I just shared with you, what could be difficult for some people is the fact that they want to get to the objective truth. They're like, well, which one is it? Is it tropical? Is it sidereal? Is it Fahrenheit? Is it Celsius? And perhaps they throw both out the window and they're like, well, they're both bullshit, and so I'm not going to use any of it. Like, the whole thing is bullshit. They're all lying to me all the time. Or they go and they just come up with a story where it makes sense. You could do that. But the real truth is, this points to how reality works in this realm. I keep using the word realm because it's at least my sense. There's more going on than just what we're experiencing here, but I do know we're here. And what we can learn is how this realm works. And how this realm works is through consciousness, and it works through beliefs. And what I just described to you with the ice cube and the melting and the awakening of dormant channels within your body for different experiences, like, that's a real thing. This is another example of like placebo effect. When you begin to realize that you have more control on a level of your experiential reality than maybe what you've given yourself credit for. And when you see other people or other, the bad guy doing it to you, and you feel like, I got to fight against it, like that might not be the best way to meet this information. Maybe the best way to meet this information is to go to one of the more fundamental truths, which is, if I can find something which is objectively true. What's objectively true? I can look at the moon and I can understand how the moon moves. I know that there are 33 vertebrae in my back. I know that ice melts. And I know, you can see the things that are objectively true, and then you could build upon it something that makes sense, a story that makes sense, and you can get behind it. Well, then you're going to begin to change the way in which you play this game. So now for you who've stuck around to this final part, as I'm beginning to wrap up, I'm going to go back to, take this out right here. I'm going to go back to my course, Grounding Consciousness. Last time, I concluded the video and I showed a snippet on the case study of Pluto. And today I'm going to show a snippet from Module 5, Mind Games of the Paradigm, Breaking Subconscious Influence. And in this module, we examine cultural, linguistic, and subliminal influences, showing how anchoring and awareness breaks subconscious manipulation. So I'm going to show you 3 minutes of that. Tools of mind control used by the paradigm down into 3 general categories: indoctrination, subliminal communication, and anchoring. Indoctrination is a little bit more focused on the conscious mind, but it definitely has subconscious influences. And this is the reward punishment strategy, both subtle rewards and punishment and overt rewards and punishment. And they are used in a psychic driving way to force a very specific way to perceive reality. It's forced upon the mind. This is both the most profound and the least occulted of the methods. Examples of this: language itself, the fact we use English to communicate what's inside of us. A language is an indoctrination due to its limitations. Measurements, these are indoctrinations. These are ways of seeing reality, values, time perception. These are the basis or foundational levels of indoctrination. Subliminal communication. So subliminal means sub, under the limbic system, but it's part of the brain. And this is subconscious. And it's communication that is designed specifically to bypass the conscious mind and speak directly to the subconscious mind. And when it does that, it creates confusion, it creates unease, and it reinforces beliefs. Many of the beliefs that are held are forced by indoctrination. The beliefs are held on the subconscious level. And then through subliminals, there's reinforcement of these beliefs, these stories that you don't even realize you're holding. We're reinforcing that they're true. Some examples of subliminal communication can include wordplay. So when I was talking to you about the word belief, it says be lie. That's part of the wordplay. Good morning. Mourning the dead. We have double entendres in our language. That's all very subliminal. The conscious mind of the individual who doesn't realize that mourning has 2 different meanings, they don't hear the second meaning. The conscious mind just hears it as a greeting, but the subconscious hears, oh, we should be in mourning right now because this is a drudgery. That would be an example. And then hidden pictures. We know about subliminal advertisings. So the third type, and this is really the most significant and the least understood, is anchoring. And anchoring occurs on the subconscious mind. And it's the purposeful linking of 2 things. And the thing could be a feeling, an emotion, an object, or a concept. There's these purposeful reinforced communications done on the subconscious mind because the conscious mind doesn't see it happening, and it's linking these 2 things together. These things which normally wouldn't be linked together, they've been linked together. Anchoring combined with subliminal communication and indoctrination creates false reality from nothing. Creates false reality from nothing. It's basically an egregore. This is how the realm works. Anchoring, subliminal communication, indoctrination, these are all techniques that could be used to serve you as well. These are just techniques. This is techniques of how the conscious mind works and how reality works and how this realm works. So here's a quick... So that's just the beginning of Module 5. That's a 17-minute module. If you are interested in going deeper in all the stuff I'm talking about, in understanding both how the sky works and the techniques of how reality, false reality has been created and how is continued to be created, then grounding consciousness, this course might be exactly the sort of balm you're looking for. I invite all of you who are interested or curious about what I've been talking about to follow the link in the notes of this video and to get the course if you think that it will move you forward in the unfoldment of your life here in this realm. Until the next video, this is Makwan, and don't take any of this stuff too seriously.